As we get closer and closer to kickoff for the 2023-24 NFL season, more football videos are going to be coming to the TikTok page. I almost said channel, but that's YouTube. So someone requested for me to talk about the NFC East, so I'm gonna do a deep dive on it, because honestly, this is the video I'm gonna do in a couple weeks where I give my overall prediction. But someone requested the NFC East, so we're gonna take a deep dive at the NFC East, look at all 4 teams, and go over their schedule and see their records and how I think they're gonna do this season. So honestly, I have the division kind of playing out the same way it did last year, but I have more teams taking more losses. So I have the Eagles finishing first. I have them with an 11-6 record. Going over their schedule real quick. Week 1, I see them beating the Patriots. They're beating the Vikings. They're beating the Buccaneers. They're beating the Commanders, because the Commanders aren't going to be good. Beating the Rams, because they're not going to be good. I have them taking a loss to the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, but they beat the Dolphins the next week. After that, they beat the Commanders for the second time. They beat the Cowboys for the first time in the season. I had them taking a loss to the Chiefs. A Super Bowl rematch between Eagles and Chiefs. I had the Chiefs winning that one. The next week, I had them losing to the Bills. The week after that, I had them losing to the 49ers. And the week after that, I had them losing to the Cowboys, because I don't see the Eagles taking both games this season against the Cowboys. So 4 straight losses for the Eagles, but they get back on track by beating the Seahawks, beating the Giants, and beating the Cardinals, who are awful, and taking a loss to the Giants to end the season. That's kind of how I see this going. Second place in the division, I see the Cowboys. They're going 10-7 for their schedule. They're taking a loss to the Giants, but next week they're beating the Jets, beating the Cardinals, because the Cardinals are awful. They're beating the Patriots. They're taking a loss to the Niners, just like in the division round this past season and the year before that, losing to the 49ers in the playoffs. I had the Cowboys beating the Chargers. They're beating the Rams. They're taking a loss to the Eagles. But they get a win next week against the Giants. They also beat the Panthers the week after that. They beat the Commanders, but they take a loss to the Seahawks. And then I had them beating the Eagles, losing to the Bills, losing to the Dolphins, and losing to the Lions. But they end the season by beating the Commanders, is how I see that going. Next, first team under 500, I had the New York Giants here. They're going 6-11. Looking at their schedule, they're beating the Cowboys week 1. They're beating the Cardinals week 2. You know, pretty good, 2-0. But then they just have a bunch of losses here. Losing to the 49ers. They're dropping the game to the Seahawks. Losing to the Miami Dolphins. Losing to the Bills. They do get a win against the Commanders, but they lose to the Jets. They beat the Raiders, though. I have them losing to the Cowboys, losing to the Commanders, dropping again to the Patriots. They do beat the Packers, because that's going to be an interesting game to watch. But they're losing to the Saints, losing to the Eagles, losing to the Rams. They do beat the Eagles the second time, though. You know, a little bit of mayhem in the standings. So we'll see at week 18 if I'm right, and I had the Giants beating the Eagles. And then finally, 4-13, I had the Commanders coming in 4th place in this NFC East. And they beat the Cardinals week 1, because I think the Cardinals are going to be absolutely dreadful. But then, you know, they lose to the Broncos, because Bronco country, let's ride. They're losing to the Bills, and they take a lot to the Eagles, and a lot to the Bears. They do beat the Falcons, because, you know, Falcon versus Commanders, because everyone wants to see that on primetime TV. They're losing to the Giants. I have them losing to the Eagles, losing to the Patriots. The Seahawks going to beat the Commanders. I do have the Commanders beating the Giants, though, because, you know, 2 good teams not playing each other. The Commanders losing to the Cowboys, losing to the Dolphins. The Commanders do beat the Rams. We have them losing to the Jets, the Niners, the Cowboys, all 3 straight losses at the end of the season. So that's kind of how I see the division going, with Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders. And Eagles and Cowboys, I think, are making the playoffs. I think the Giants might miss it this year. We'll see. But those are the 2 playoff teams I have coming from the NFC East. I think the Eagles have a really good team. They could go back to the Super Bowl, at least NFC Championship game. Again, I could see that happening pretty confidently. The Cowboys going to find another embarrassing way to lose in the playoff this season, and hopefully Mike McCarthy gets fired. So we'll see how those predictions pan out. But that's how I see the NFC East going this year in the NFL.